It was late afternoon in New York, and the sky seemed to bleed slowly in shades of orange and purple, as if the horizon itself carried a secret too ancient to be spoken. The streets pulsed with honking horns, hurried footsteps, and indifferent voices. But amid this urban orchestra, something stopped time. A barefoot little girl sitting on the cold marble sidewalk, with a lost gaze that didn't match her age. Her coat was too big, torn at the shoulders, and in her hands she clutched a small brown paper bag, holding what seemed to be her only dinner, a piece of stale bread. She didn't ask for money. She didn't beg. She didn't speak. She just looked, and what was in that gaze made the world seem smaller, colder, more unjust. It wasn't just poverty. It was abandonment. It was silence. It was a scream without sound. On that same street, a sleek black SUV pulled up slowly in front of a mirrored building with marble columns. From it stepped a man in a grey suit, impeccable Italian shoes, and a watch that cost more than anyone's car in that neighborhood. His name was Leonard Whitmore, CEO of one of the country's largest biomedical technology holdings, known for his coldness, efficiency, and for never, under any circumstances, deviating from his routine. He didn't smile in photos. He didn't smile in meetings. Not even when his profits broke historic records. Leonard was a living statue, handsome, elegant, feared but empty. Behind his amber eyes, there was a trapped soul. No one knew why, but he carried something within him that neither time nor money could heal. It was as if every step he took was an attempt to escape from something, or someone. That night, he was supposed to attend a charity gala, but he told the driver to turn around. He wanted to walk, something he hadn't done in years. As he passed the girl, he barely looked. She was just another shadow among thousands. But as he turned the corner, something made him stop. He couldn't say what. It was like a weight in his chest, an old memory trying to break through. He slowly turned his eyes back. She was still there, sitting, motionless, her gaze fixed on nothing. Leonard hesitated. He felt angry at himself for hesitating, but he walked back. He stopped in front of her and pulled out his wallet. He took out a few bills, but as he extended his hand, she didn't move. She didn't reach out. She didn't thank him. She just raised her face and met his eyes, as if she knew who he was. Leonard felt something he hadn't felt in years. Discomfort. Those eyes. There was something there. A mirror? A void? A memory? He didn't know. He put the money away. He took off his coat and draped it over her slowly. The gesture seemed to break something in time. She whispered, "You don't remind me of anyone, but you look at me as if you remember." A shiver ran up Leonard's spine. It was then that he noticed the necklace, a small pendant hanging from a frayed leather cord. It was old, scratched, but unmistakable. A small silver star with a sliver of amber embedded in the center. Leonard staggered back. The air fled his lungs. The ground seemed to spin. It was impossible. That necklace no longer existed. He had buried it himself with... No, it couldn't be. His knees buckled. He fell to the ground in front of the girl, as if the entire city had vanished. There was no traffic, no buildings, no past, just her. And that necklace. Leonard cried. For the first time in 20 years, he cried. The girl didn't understand, but she looked at him with a tenderness that disarmed him. "Why are you crying, handsome man?" she asked. And Leonard, not knowing what to say, only answered, "Because I thought I had lost this, and with it, I lost myself." In the days that followed, Leonard couldn't get the girl out of his mind, nor the necklace, nor that feeling that time had turned back to collect an old debt. He did what his businessman's logic demanded. He hired a private detective. He didn't just want to help the girl. He wanted to understand. He wanted to know where she came from, who she was, who had given her that necklace. The clues, however, led him far beyond what he could have imagined. Her name was Lila, 7 years old. No official birth records. She had been living in makeshift shelters since she was 4. Her mother, missing. Her father, unknown. But a caregiver from an abandoned orphanage gave a clue. A woman named Anne had left Lila there years ago, visibly ill, begging someone to save her daughter from a fate that wasn't hers. Leonard froze. Anne. It was the name of the woman he had loved and abandoned. The name he avoided even in his thoughts. The name he had sworn never to utter again. The last time he saw Anne was exactly 7 years ago. She had shown up at his penthouse, pregnant, her eyes full of hope. He had thrown her out, told her it wasn't his, that it couldn't be, that it was a trap. Anne left without a word, and he never heard from her again. Until now. Suddenly everything made sense. The pain, the guilt, the emptiness. Lila wasn't just a street child. She was what remained of everything Leonard had buried. She was the seed of the love he had rejected. And the necklace? It was the same one he had given Anne when they were in their early 20s, swearing eternal love under the stars of a summer night. She had said, "One day, if you forget who you are, this necklace will remind you." And now, it was her daughter who wore the reminder around her neck. God, fate, life, whatever or whoever it was, had brought Lila back like a divine whisper in the midst of concrete. But Leonard didn't know how to approach her. He didn't know what to say, what to do. The man who negotiated billion-dollar mergers with a pen trembled before a little girl with holy socks and an old necklace. He knew he couldn't just tell the truth. Not like that. Not now. But he also knew he could no longer run. So, he did something he had never done. He took a week off. For 7 days, he spent every day with Lila, without her knowing who he was. He brought food, told stories, brought coats and blankets. She laughed, shared secrets, asked why he smelled like lemons, and he just smiled, saying it might be the soap. But inside, Leonard was silently rebuilding himself. Each of her laughs pieced together a part of him that had been broken long ago. That morning, it was raining, but it wasn't a fierce, violent rain. It was a gentle rain, as if the sky were trying to wash away some guilt that was also its own. Leonard parked the car 3 blocks away and walked to the alley where Lila usually stayed. He carried a bag with new clothes, waterproof boots, a storybook, and hot chocolate in a thermos. But as he turned the corner, something was different. The alley was empty. The cardboard where she slept was soaked. The stacked cans were gone. His heart raced. He searched the area, asked shopkeepers. No one had seen her since the night before. Anxiety grew like an uncontrollable fire. He called the detective. Nothing. Hours passed. Leonard was no longer the CEO. He was just a desperate man searching for the daughter he had never had the courage to acknowledge. It was at the end of the day that the phone rang. A social worker from a public hospital had received a girl with no documents, no companions. She had a high fever, a dry cough, and had been found by a rideshare driver collapsed on a sidewalk near a construction site. Leonard ran out as if time were running out. On the way, he felt the weight of the years in every breath. When he arrived at the hospital, he had to steady his knees to keep from collapsing. The pediatric ward was cold, smelling of alcohol and suspended hope. When they opened the door to the room, there she was, asleep, too small for the bed, clutching the necklace. A nurse explained it was advanced pneumonia. Nothing was certain yet. She was fighting, but she needed time and care. Leonard sat beside her. He took her hand gently and cried, not like the first time, in shock, but like a father who realizes too late what he lost. "Forgive me, my daughter," he whispered. "Forgive me for denying your existence. Forgive me for being a coward, for not being there." She didn't respond. She was asleep, but a single tear rolled from her closed eye. Leonard felt it was an answer, a beginning. In the days that followed, he didn't leave the hospital. He brought flowers, read children's books, tucked her in with care. The doctors were amazed. "Does she have anyone else?" they asked. "She does now," Leonard replied, with a newfound firmness in his voice. And each night, as his heart warmed, hers beat stronger. Slowly, Lila improved. The fever subsided. Her smile returned. Until one Sunday morning she opened her eyes and said, "You dreamed of me, didn't you?" Leonard smiled. "Yes." And the dream became reality. But something was still missing. The truth. Leonard knew he had to tell her. He couldn't live hiding behind gifts, visits, and silent hugs. He took her for a walk in the park as soon as she was discharged. They sat by a lake. Ducks passed by, children played. Lila ate cotton candy, her hands sticky. Leonard watched her every move as if trying to memorize a miracle. Then he took a deep breath. "Lila, can I tell you a story?" She nodded with wide eyes. "Many years ago, I met a woman named Anne. She was sweet, brave, and she loved me. But I was foolish. I ran away. And when she needed me most, I left her, and she was expecting a baby." Lila stopped chewing. The cotton candy melted slowly between her fingers. "You knew my mom?" Leonard nodded. "Yes, and that necklace you wear. I gave it to her. On a beautiful day under the stars, she said it was a way to remind me of who I was. Silence fell like snow. Lila stared at him, unblinking. So, you're... Her voice trembled, and Leonard, eyes full of tears, only said, I'm your father. And if you let me, I want to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of being called that. Lila didn't say anything. She just threw herself into his arms. She cried, and Leonard cried too. There, amid the noise of children and the song of birds, two hearts met. Two stories became one, and the past for the first time seemed forgiven. From that day on, Leonard changed. The cold penthouse became a home. The art paintings were replaced with colorful drawings and magazine cutouts. Silence gave way to laughter. The wine cellar turned into a toy shelf. He enrolled her in a private school. He drove her every day, made lunchboxes with hidden notes, and watched her class performances with a trembling phone in his hand. At the company, he created a fund exclusively for street children. For every approved project, Lila received a flower. It's your name, you know, he said one day. Lila means flower, and that's what you are. The flower that grew from my guilt, but taught me what love is. Time passed. 3 years went by. Lila grew. She became a lively, clever, curious girl. And Leonard was a different man. No one recognized him anymore, not even himself. But one day, while sorting through old papers, he found a box. Inside were letters from Anne. Letters she had written and never sent. One of them said, If you ever find our daughter, please don't deny who you are. And tell her I loved her with all my being, even when I was afraid, even when I knew I might never see you both together. Tell her, she's the miracle you and I forgot to protect. Leonard cried for hours, and that night he read the letter to Lila, holding her hand with the strength of someone who would never let go again. One weekend they decided to visit an orphanage where Lila had lived. She wanted to donate toys, clothes, and books. Upon arriving, a caregiver teared up seeing her so different and said, That girl always had something special. When all the others cried, she sat by the window and said, One day my father will come for me. He'll recognize the necklace. Leonard fell to his knees. It was like reliving that first night. That phrase was the echo of a child's faith that never knew the despair of giving up. And now he knew. God had been in every detail, even when he himself believed in nothing anymore. As they left, Lila held his hand and said, Daddy, do you think Mommy sees us from heaven? Leonard looked at the sky as if searching for an answer, and for the first time in a long time he felt something greater than himself, a warmth, a presence, and he smiled. Yes, my flower, she sees, and she smiles with us. Some months later, Leonard received an unexpected invitation. An international organization wanted to honor him for creating the Light on the Sidewalk Fund, which had taken over 1,000 children off the streets in less than 2 years. The event would be broadcast live with leaders, artists, and celebrities in attendance. He hesitated. He didn't feel worthy of applause, but Lila was adamant. People need to hear your story, because maybe there's another father out there who also needs to recognize the necklace. Those words echoed within him like a calling. In the grand Boston auditorium, under the spotlights, Leonard didn't read prepared speeches. He spoke from the heart. He told the story of the cold man who saw a girl on a sidewalk, and how an old necklace brought him back to what mattered. He spared no tears, nor truths. He named names. He publicly asked for forgiveness from Anne's memory. He said the award wasn't his. It was Lila's, and it was for all the children still waiting, even unknowingly, for someone to recognize them. The audience was silent. Many cried. At the end, Lila walked onto the stage and hugged him in front of everyone. The image went around the world. It appeared in newspapers, viral videos, and reports. The millionaire who fell to his knees for a necklace. But for Leonard, none of that mattered. The real prize was being able to wake up every day and make breakfast for his daughter. The rest was just an echo. And so the years passed. Lila grew, and with her, the questions grew. One night, now 12 years old, she asked why Leonard never had other children. He hesitated. I think my heart was waiting for you even without knowing it. But she pressed. And Mommy? Do you still love her? Leonard was silent for a while. Then, looking at the sky, he answered, I think true love never dies. It just waits for the right moment to bloom again, in another place, in another way, like it did with you. That same year, Lila had the idea to hold an exhibition with drawings by children rescued through the Institute's efforts. Leonard supported it immediately. They rented a gallery and the opening was a success. Among the artworks, one drawing stopped Leonard in his tracks. It was simple: a silver star and a blue tear falling onto it. In the bottom corner, the signature, Lila. He approached and asked what it meant. She smiled. "It's the necklace, but the tear isn't sadness, it's gratitude. Because without that tear, you never would have seen me." The exhibition raised enough funds to build 2 new shelters. But more than that, it revealed Lila's artistic talent, and she was invited to study at a renowned art school. Leonard cried on enrollment day like a father seeing a future that almost didn't exist unfold before his eyes. And every morning as she got ready for class, he repeated the same phrase, "You are my miracle and my gift." On Lila's 15th birthday, Leonard organized a surprise. He invited former caregivers, shelter friends, teachers, institute colleagues, and family she didn't even know she had. The venue was decorated with sunflowers, Anne's favorite. In the center was a table with a box. When the time came, Leonard called Lila to the stage and handed her the gift. She opened it slowly. It was the original necklace restored, now with a new white gold chain. "This necklace brought you to me. Now it's your turn to decide where it will take you." She didn't say anything. She just cried and hugged him tightly. It was like closing a cycle. The necklace that belonged to a mother, that touched a broken heart, was now in the hands of a daughter who had everything to not have been, but was. Soon after, Lila wrote an article for an international magazine. It told her story under the title, "The Day God Saw Me Through a Stranger's Eyes." The text went viral. It was simple, poetic, full of pain and redemption, and at the end, a phrase that became the Institute's symbol: "Every child is a miracle waiting to be recognized." Time didn't stop. The years raced on. Lila became an adult, graduated in visual arts and psychology. She decided to work with street children and victims of emotional abandonment. She founded her own NGO, Invisible Roots. Leonard, now with grey hair and calmer eyes, was no longer the CEO of empires, but he was the chairman of the foundation's board, and his greatest joy was hearing the stories Lila brought. "Today I met a boy who only talked to stones, and a girl who dreams of being an astronaut. Can you believe it?" she'd say, and he'd smile. "Of course I believe it. You taught me that even miracles need soil to grow." One winter afternoon they sat on the porch. Lila took her father's hand and said, "You know, I've always thought about writing a book, but not a fairy tale, a real book, about everything, about you, about Mommy, about me, and about the necklace. Can I?" Leonard nodded, eyes welling up. "I only ask one thing. Don't spare me. Tell the truth, so that other men like me know they can still come back." That book was published a year later. It was called The Necklace and the Man Who Forgot Who He Was. It sold thousands of copies. But for Lila, what mattered most was the letter she found in the publisher's mailbox. It was from a single mother who wrote, "After reading your book, I finally told my son's father that he exists, and he cried. Cried like your father cried. Thank you for showing us that sometimes pain is just an invitation to healing." One night, late in life, Leonard sat with Lila and held the necklace in his hands. It was old again. The scratches had returned, but the amber's glow still endured. "Do you think the pain comes back?" he asked. And Lila, with a gentle smile, answered, "Pain is just a bridge, Daddy. It never meant to destroy you. It only wanted to lead you to me." He closed his eyes, and in that moment, everything seemed to make sense. The tears, the cold, the abandonment, the reunion, the necklace. It was as if every thread of that chain had been woven by an invisible, patient hand, waiting for the right moment to pull. And when it did, it brought a man back to life. It brought a daughter home. It brought the sky back to the concrete. It was autumn when Lila decided she needed to return to the place where it all began, not to relive the pain, but to understand the distance she had traveled. Leonard insisted on going with her. They walked together through the streets of New York, no longer as strangers, but as a family, as 2 survivors of the same miracle. When they reached the alley where she used to sleep, they found a new parking lot paved, with sensors and modern signs. Nothing remained. No trace of the girl sitting on the sidewalk, holding a piece of bread and wearing a torn coat. But in the midst of that cold modernity, Lila knelt placed her hand on the ground and whispered, "This is where God saw me. This is where my life began." Leonard stayed silent, respecting the moment. Then he pulled a small package from his pocket. Inside was a replica of the original necklace made by him. It was simpler, no gold or stone, just a wooden pendant with a star carved by hand. "So another child might find hope here one day," he said, burying it silently. Lila smiled. "So the miracle repeats." And for a moment, the wind seemed to stop. The trees fell silent, as if the world itself were blessing that gesture. Back home, Leonard dove into his projects, but not as before, not with the rigidity of an executive, but with the passion of someone with something to give the world before leaving. He founded new social initiatives, created late adoption campaigns, implemented emotional therapy programs for rescued parents and children, and above all, he became a constant presence in Lila's NGO. With every story, every hug, he relived parts of himself he never imagined he had. One cloudy afternoon, they received a visit from a boy named Eli, 8 years old, shy eyes, and a silent fear deep in his soul. He didn't trust anyone. He didn't talk to adults. But when he saw Leonard, he approached slowly, touched his hand and asked, "Were you ever invisible too?" Leonard knelt before him, held his small hands, and answered firmly, "Yes, but someone saw me." And when that happened, everything changed. From that day on, Eli began to draw, to talk, to smile. And Leonard once again understood. Every necklace is a seed, every pain, a story seeking an answer. With time, Lila began to be invited to international events, lectures and meetings with other social leaders. She became a reference, but she never forgot her origins. "I'm just a flower that grew in the asphalt," she'd say. In one of her most striking speeches, she opened with, "My father fell to his knees for a necklace, but what he lifted from that ground was himself." The audience gave a standing ovation, and Leonard, watching from the front row, just cried silently, hands clasped as if in prayer. It was after that event that Lila decided to write her second book, Letters to the Father Who Found Me. In it, she gathered reflections, stories of other rescued children, and symbolic letters addressed to the old Leonard, the one who still didn't know who he was. One letter said, "If you're reading this and still running, know that the pain won't stop chasing you, but it won't swallow you either. It just wants to guide you back, to home, to your truth." The book became required reading in schools, shelters, and even psychology courses. The impact was so profound that a TV network proposed turning Lila and Leonard's story into a film. After much resistance, they agreed, but with one condition: they would participate in the production to ensure nothing was romanticized or artificial. Pain has a name, it has a face, and it has truth. It can't be edited, Lila told the director. When the film was released, the world stopped. Millions watched, cried, shared. The hashtag, The Miracle Necklace, went viral. But for Leonard, what mattered most was the note he found on the dressing room mirror after the premiere. Handwritten by Lila, it said, "You're not the man in the movie. You're the man who made the movie possible. I love you." At 70, Leonard no longer moved with the same agility, but his mind was more alive than ever. He spent his days writing, visiting shelters, and planting trees named after the children who passed through the foundation. "Every tree is a second chance," he'd say. Lila, now married to a musician who had also been rescued from the streets, was expecting her first child. When she shared the news with her father, he just hugged her, as if time had stopped again, and whispered, "The world is about to meet another miracle." When the baby was born, Leonard held him and felt something he had never felt before. A complete circle. A love that needed no forgiveness, no reconciliation. A pure, fresh love, present from the first second. "What will his name be?" he asked, emotional. Lila looked at her husband, then at her father, and answered, "We'll call him Amos, because in Hebrew it means the one who is carried, and he'll be carried by all the love stories that came before him." Leonard didn't live much longer. His body began to show signs. His memory faltered. His steps grew short, but he said every day was a gift, every morning a miracle. One serene afternoon, beside Lila and Amos, he asked to hear a song Anne used to sing when they were together. As the melody filled the room, he smiled, looked at the sky through the window and murmured, "Thank you for bringing me back." He closed his eyes and was gone. At the funeral, there were no grandiose speeches. Just a reading of Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the broken-hearted. Lila wore the necklace around her neck, and she held Amos's hand tightly. "He didn't die. He bloomed," she whispered to her son. "And whenever you feel lost, look at the stars. Your grandfather is in one of them, the one that shines the brightest." Spring arrived fiercely that year, as if nature itself wanted to resurrect everything that had been wounded. Lila decided to transform Leonard's old house, that penthouse that for so many years had been a silent tomb of feelings, into something alive, the Anne Whitmore Hope Center, a space that would combine psychological care, artistic activities, and an alternative school for street children, with a methodology based on love, connection, and restoring dignity. The name was chosen in honor of the mother she barely knew, but whose absence had shaped her entire journey. Anne never had a voice, but now other mothers will. The opening ceremony was simple. A children's choir sang. Balloons were released with the names of rescued children, and above the entrance, a plaque was fixed with the phrase Lila said when she first saw Leonard. "You don't remind me of anyone, but you look at me as if you remember." The house was completely renovated. The walls, once white and cold, gained soft colors, drawings by the children, photos of real moments, of hugs and eyes that shone again. In the center of the lobby, the original necklace was placed in a glass case with an inscription below. This necklace reconnected a father to his daughter. May it inspire all the reunions still to come. Each day, more and more children were welcomed. Some bore physical scars, others scars on their souls, but all received something no government institution offered, someone who looked them in the eyes and said, "You matter." And that simple phrase was like water on dry land. Many began to talk, to draw, to sing, to trust. A boy named Noah, just 5 years old, refused to take off his coat even in the heat. When asked why, he answered, "Because it's the last thing my mom gave me before she disappeared." No one forced him to remove it, but every day someone told him, "You're safe now." And one day, quietly, he hung it on the coat rack and smiled. It was a silent miracle. And Lila cried in the bathroom for 15 minutes, like a mother watching her child's first step. In the second year of the center's operation, Lila received a handwritten letter from rural Brazil. It was from a woman who said she was inspired by her book and project, and had started a shelter in the northeast hinterland with the same name, Invisible Roots. She wrote, "The children here also carry invisible necklaces. Each one waits to be recognized. Thank you for showing us that love has no borders." Lila printed the letter, framed it, and hung it in the reading room. It was a seed that had crossed oceans. Over time, the Anne Whitmore Center became a global reference for care and family reintegration. Psychologists, educators, therapists, and volunteers from around the world came to learn from Lila, but she never let the structure become a monument to vanity. "This isn't an NGO. It's an extension of my home, and every child here is my family." She made a point of remembering every name, listening to every story, and repeating, always, "You're not alone." One golden autumn, Lila visited Leonard's grave with Amos. The boy was now 7, curious, talkative, passionate about hero stories. They sat together in front of the simple headstone, which read only, "Leonard Whitmore found himself in love." Amos placed a flower on the grave and asked, "Mummy, would Grandpa be proud of me?" She smiled, touching his face. "He wouldn't be proud of you, my son. He'd see himself in you, because you're part of the answer he waited his whole life for." When they returned home, Lila found a box left at the gate. No sender. Inside was just a yellowed letter and a necklace. The pendant was a silver butterfly with the initials AW engraved. The letter was from Anne. It said, "If my daughter ever finds this necklace, I want her to know I never stopped loving her, and if she's reading this, it's because the world still has hope." Lila broke down in tears. It was like hearing her mother for the first time, like an embrace from another dimension. And in that moment she understood. There was a time for mourning, and now was a time for flight. Inspired by this posthumous reunion, Lila created a new project, Flight Necklaces, where each child received a symbolic necklace after a year at the center, not as a reminder of pain, but as a symbol of their new identity. And as she handed them out, she said, "This necklace has no magic, The magic is in you, but it will remind you when the world forgets that you are loved. The impact was so profound that countries began replicating the model. Entire cities created centers based on Lila's methodology, but for her, nothing surpassed sitting with a child, hearing their story, and seeing them sleep in peace. It was there, in the silence of the night, in the sound of a welcomed child's calm breathing, that she felt the presence of her father, her mother, and everything faith had taught her, that miracles aren't born from grandeur, but from simple gestures, repeated with love. One night, after telling a story to a group of girls, one of them asked, "Aunt Lila, do you believe we can change the world?" She smiled, holding the girl's small hand. "I don't just believe it. I see it every day, in every laugh of yours, in every tear you overcome. The world is already changing, Ad, because you exist." And in that moment, Lila understood that life no longer needed to be a struggle to not forget. Now, it was a walk to remind others of who they are, just as her father had done for her, just as Anne tried to do for Leonard, just as God always did for the forgotten, the invisible, the fallen, and as he would continue to do, through every necklace, every hug, every reconnection that sprouted from the impossible. The years passed like leaves carried by the wind, and Lila's story continued to intertwine with those of thousands of children around the world. But there were days when, despite so many achievements, she woke with a weight in her chest, an old echo that never fully faded. On those mornings, she walked to the memory garden at the Institute and sat alone in front of the sculpture of a girl kneeling before a man in a suit. She stayed there in silence, as if listening to an invisible song, waiting for time to say something, because deep down, she knew, some pains never disappear. They just learn to live alongside love. It was on one such cloudy morning that she received a visit from an elderly man with white hair, slow steps, and a lost gaze. He said he had known Leonard decades earlier, when he was just an ambitious young man, directionless, who had just lost the woman he loved. The man's name was Charles, a former philosophy professor who worked at a small orphanage and, for a brief time, had tried to counsel Leonard. "I failed him, Miss Lila. I saw him crumble and couldn't hold him up. When I heard about what you two lived through, I had to come." Lila held the old man's hands and said with tenderness, "You didn't fail. Sometimes the seed we plant takes decades to bloom, but it blooms." He cried, and he left her an envelope with an old photo of Leonard and Anne, embracing under an autumn tree, smiling with their eyes closed. On the back, a handwritten note from Anne, "One day he'll remember, even if it takes a lifetime." Inspired by this unexpected reunion, Lila started a new project, the Hope Archive, a physical and digital space where every child, volunteer, or family member could record their story, their traumas, their triumphs, their words, not to create a sensationalist collection, but so no one would be forgotten again. "Every memory is a bridge for those in the dark," she said, and the space soon filled with videos, letters, drawings, testimonies, and records of faith. There were voices there that had never been heard anywhere, and now finally they were being seen, read, and felt by other souls. One night, while reviewing one of the oldest archives, Lila found a worn cassette tape. It was a recording of an unknown woman singing a lullaby. The lyrics were simple, repetitive, but there was something in the tone, the emotional delivery, that made Lila tremble. She recognized that voice. It was Anne. It was her mother. Heart racing, she had the recording digitally restored, and when she could finally hear it clearly, she noticed the song ended with an almost imperceptible whisper. "One day my daughter will hear this, and she'll know I never left her." Lila cried so much that night she fell asleep on the studio floor. She felt cradled by an invisible presence, by a love that survived time, death, and pain. That recording was added to the center's archive under the title, "The Song That Waited 30 Years. Beside it, a simple plaque read, "Listen with your heart." And there many parents, children, and orphans found solace. Some knelt, others just closed their eyes and let the tears fall, because shared pain is healed pain. And Lila knew that with every restored voice, the world became a lighter, more livable place. During this time, Lila began writing letters to her son, Amos, who was now in London, studying and leading art workshops for young refugees. The letters weren't just updates, but deep reflections, confessions of doubts and hopes. One read, "My son, maybe the world will still be too harsh. Maybe we'll still see abandonment, injustice, cruel silence. But every time you give someone a necklace, every time you tell someone I see you, you're changing eternity. One gesture at a time. Amos, in turn, responded with surprising maturity. In a poignant letter, he wrote, "Mum, today I met a young Syrian girl who lost her entire family in bombings. She barely speaks. But when I showed her your necklace, she looked into my eyes and touched the pendant with her fingers. And even without words, I understood. She remembered who she was. And for a second, she came back. It was then that Lila made a bold decision. She would travel. She would leave the center's daily management in the hands of the new generation, trained by her, made up of former rescued children. Her mission now was global, to visit every center, embrace every project, hear the forgotten voices of the world. She wanted to see with her own eyes how the necklaces were touching lives in African villages, Brazilian favelas, refugee camps, war zones, women's prisons, and public schools. Her first stop was Lebanon. There she met a girl named Farah, who at 10 years old had lost everything except a piece of embroidered fabric with her mother's name. When Lila gave her a necklace, she didn't react immediately. But that night, the girl slept with the necklace in her hands, and for the first time in months she had no nightmares. She smiled in her sleep, the caregiver said. Lila smiled too, because she understood. Even sleep can be healed by love. Then she went to the Congo, where former child soldiers were learning to trust again. In a discussion circle, a teenager named Juma stood up, looked at her intently, and asked, "Why do you come from so far to hear our pain?" And Lila answered firmly, "Because no one should have to scream to be heard, and because when you speak I remember myself." He nodded, and that day, Lila knew. The seeds were spreading. In the months that followed, she traveled to 10 more countries. She planted trees, gave out necklaces, sang Anne's song, embraced wounds, and in every corner of the world there was a child, a youth, an elder, waiting only to be seen. One night, alone in a hotel in India, Lila looked in the mirror and saw, for the first time in a long time, the same girl who once sat on a sidewalk holding a piece of bread, staring at nothing. But now, that girl smiled, because she had been found, because the necklace was no longer an object, it was a mission, an identity. A living bridge between broken skies and mended hearts. The morning was serene when Lila returned to Brazil after over a year traveling between countries, hearing voices, connecting broken souls. Stepping back onto the grounds of the Anne Whitmore Center, she was greeted by old and new faces, all with smiles carrying stories, some healed, others still healing. The walls were different, fuller. There were new paintings, new phrases, new names. But at the heart of the building, the case with the original necklace remained unchanged. She approached, touched the glass with reverence and whispered, "I'm back, but I was never far." That same week, a ceremony was held to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the first center's founding. It was simple, as always. There were songs, children's performances, dances in colorful clothes, tables with cakes made by volunteers. But the most anticipated moment came at the end, when Amos, now an adult, returned to Brazil to surprise his mother. Seeing him walk through the garden, Lila could barely move. He was taller, with the same gentle eyes as his grandfather, and holding a new necklace in his hands. "This one," he said, "is for you, because now you need to remember who you are." It was a replica of the original necklace, but with a blue stone in the center. Blue, like Anne's eyes. Blue like the sky that had witnessed so many new beginnings. She received it in tears, and in that moment she understood. The cycle had closed, but the fruits kept growing. Her son was now leading. The children were now leading. The voices that once trembled now echoed, and the miracle, that first miracle, was no longer just a point in time. It was a living chain of memories that healed. In the days that followed, Lila began writing a new book by hand, not for publication, not for the papers, but to leave as a silent legacy for Amos and all the children who would come after. She called the manuscript "When God Looked at Me." It was an intimate, profound, unfiltered account. She wrote about her nights of cold and hunger, about the day Leonard fell to his knees, about the first time she heard her mother's voice in a dream, about the embrace that rebuilt her world. On the last page, she wrote, "If you found this notebook, it's because there's still faith in the world. If you have a necklace, even an invisible one, Know that it's not made of metal, but of memory. And if you're still searching for someone, keep going, because there are eyes that see you. There are arms waiting for you. And there is a father, the greatest of all, who never lost sight of you. She placed the notebook inside the case next to the necklace, as if placing something sacred on an altar. And that day, there were no grand speeches. But every child passed by, touched the glass and said their name aloud, like a ritual, like an affirmation, like a miracle being spoken once more. Years later, the Ann Whitmore Center would become an international network of schools, homes, and healing communities. But it would never stop being what it was from the start, the place where someone was seen, where a girl with a necklace turned pain into a bridge, where a millionaire found his soul by kneeling before the truth. Lila, now elderly, continued walking the halls, sitting with the children, telling stories and writing letters. Her face was more lined, her hands slower, but her presence was still light. One ordinary afternoon at sunset, a newly arrived child sat beside her and asked, "Grandma Lila, were you ever invisible?" She smiled, held the necklace hanging around her neck, and answered with tenderness, "Yes, I was, but someone saw me, and I never stopped existing again." And so, with simplicity, life went on. The seasons changed. New children arrived. Others left, healed. The world outside remained noisy, confusing, sometimes cruel. But inside, within that center born of regret and grace, time seemed to breathe more slowly. Every wall told a story, every sculpture a gesture, every necklace a promise. And whenever the world seemed to darken again, someone lit a candle in that garden, sometimes a child, sometimes a volunteer, sometimes a stranger, and left there beside the statue a handwritten note, "I was seen." Because in the end it's not about donations, nor fame, nor institutions. It's about knees touching the ground, about necklaces connecting pasts and futures, about a look that says, "I see you," and about a God who, even in silence, never stopped looking.